My name is Daniel, and what I'm about to tell you is something I never thought I would experience, something that changed me forever. I died. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't a hallucination, it was more real than anything I've ever felt in my entire life. And what I saw on the other side shook me to my core. It was a regular day, just like any other. I woke up to the sound of my alarm, stretched my arms, and yawned as the golden sunlight streamed through my bedroom window. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mixing with the distant hum of the world waking up outside. I had no idea that this would be the last morning of my life. I went through the motions of my routine: quick breakfast, a glance at my emails, a rushed goodbye to my wife as I grabbed my keys. The day ahead was packed with meetings, deadlines, and errands. Just another ordinary Tuesday, until it wasn't. I was driving down the highway, my hands gripping the wheel loosely as my favorite song played on the radio. The sky was a perfect blue, with wisps of white clouds drifting lazily above. Everything felt peaceful. And then, impact, a flash of headlights in my peripheral vision, a deafening crash of metal colliding, the sharp jolt of my body being thrown forward, pain, searing, overwhelming pain. And then, nothing. Silence. A silence so profound, so vast, it swallowed everything. I remember blinking, confused. The world around me had changed. I could still see the wreckage of my car, the shattered glass glistening like tiny diamonds on the asphalt. People were running towards me. A man was on his phone, shouting frantically for help. The air was filled with sirens wailing in the distance, but none of them could see me, because I was no longer in my body. I was standing outside of it, looking down at the lifeless shell that had once been me. A strange calmness settled over me, even as my mind screamed that this wasn't possible. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to be watching this. And then I felt it, a pull, something unseen yet undeniable. A force drawing me away, guiding me toward a tunnel of light that stretched before me. The light wasn't just bright, it was alive. It pulsed with a warmth that was both inviting and terrifying. I felt an overwhelming urge to step forward, to embrace whatever was waiting on the other side. But there were shadows at the edges of the tunnel, shifting and whispering. I didn't understand the words at first, but as they grew louder, a chill crept through me. Not yet, turn back. Not yet. A deep unease settled in my chest. Something wasn't right, and then just as suddenly as it had begun, the world around me shifted. I was no longer at the crash site, no longer on Earth. I stood in a place beyond time, beyond reality. A realm so vast, so incomprehensible, that my mind struggled to grasp it. And before me, I saw something that made my soul tremble, a vision of what was coming, a choice that every soul would soon have to make. The final choice. I need you to listen to what I saw, because time is running out. Everything I thought I knew about life, about existence itself, shattered in an instant. As I drifted above my own body, the sounds of the world grew distant, like an old radio slowly fading into static. The sirens, the voices, the panicked shouts. They no longer seemed to belong to me. A strange weightlessness settled over me. I wasn't breathing. I had no heartbeat, and yet I was aware, more aware than I had ever been in my entire life. Then that pull again, gentle yet irresistible. I turned my gaze away from my lifeless body and towards the source. The tunnel of light stretched before me, vast and endless, like a river of pure energy flowing into eternity. It wasn't just light, it was conscious, alive with an intelligence I couldn't comprehend. It called to me. But as I took a step forward, I noticed something. The shadows. They clung to the edges of the tunnel, shifting like smoke, their movements unnatural, watching me. At first, I thought they were just shapes, tricks of my fractured mind trying to make sense of the impossible. Then I heard them, faint whispers. Not yet, turn back. Their voices weren't human. They weren't mechanical. They were something else. The way they spoke, it wasn't with words, but with a presence, a pressure in the air that settled around me like a suffocating fog. A cold dread crawled up my spine. These things, they weren't here to help me. I instinctively recoiled, but the light continued to pull me forward. It was like gravity, pulling me towards something I knew I couldn't resist, and then, suddenly, I wasn't moving anymore. I was standing somewhere else. The tunnel disappeared, the shadows vanished, and I found myself in a space that defied every rule of existence I had ever known. There was no sky, no ground, just an expanse so vast it seemed to stretch forever. And yet I wasn't alone. Something was there, a presence so immense, so powerful, that the moment I became aware of it, I knew it had been aware of me the entire time. I didn't need to see it to feel it. This wasn't just some energy, some cosmic force. This was intelligence. It knew me, not just my name, not just my thoughts. It knew me completely. Every joy, every pain, every secret, every moment of my existence laid bare before it. And in that instant, I understood something terrifying. There was no hiding here, no pretense, no excuses, no justifications. Was being seen, truly seen, for the first time in my entire existence. And then, without a single word being spoken, I felt the question, "Are you ready?" I had no answer. I didn't even know what the question truly meant. Was I ready for what? I wanted to speak, to ask, to understand. But before I could, something changed. The space around me shifted, and suddenly, I wasn't just standing there anymore. I was watching something unfold. The earth stretched before me, vast and familiar. Cities glowed in the darkness, lights flickering like tiny stars across the continents. At first, everything seemed normal, but then I saw it. Something was spreading. A darkness creeping across nations, seeping into every corner of existence like ink bleeding into paper. It wasn't like a shadow. Shadows obeyed light. This was different. It swallowed light. It consumed it. I saw people, millions of them, walking through their lives completely unaware. They laughed, they worked, they lived, never noticing the thing that was wrapping around them like a fog, whispering lies into their ears, turning them against one another. I wanted to scream, to warn them, but they couldn't hear me. And then, in the midst of the growing darkness, he appeared. A man. No, not a man. Something else. He looked human, tall, charismatic, his face familiar and kind. His voice was soothing, like a melody designed to calm every fear. He spoke and the world listened. "I have come to bring peace." The people cheered. Nations embraced him. He promised a new era, one free from war, free from suffering, and they believed him. I wanted to warn them, to tell them something was wrong, but the moment I focused on him, I felt it. A presence behind the mask, an ancient presence, something that had walked the earth before, whispering in the ears of kings, shaping empires, twisting history to its will. And now it had found its final vessel. He wasn't bringing peace, he was bringing submission, and the world was accepting it willingly. Then, as if someone had pulled back a veil, I saw what was happening beneath the surface, a war, not of flesh and blood, but of spirit. I saw figures of pure light standing against the darkness, their weapons glowing with divine fire. But they were struggling. For every warrior who stood, 1,000 shadows rose against them. And then I understood. This war, it wasn't fought with swords or armies. It was fought with prayer. I saw the streams of light pouring from the earth, from the hearts of those who still believed. Each prayer was a force, a weapon, a shield, but many of the warriors were weakening, not because they were outnumbered, but because people had stopped praying for them. I saw what happened when a believer gave up, when doubt overtook faith. The stream of light would flicker and vanish, and the warrior it once strengthened would fall. A crushing realization hit me. The world thought prayer was just words, but here I saw the truth. Every prayer had power, every word, every whisper. A faith was a weapon in a battle most of us never even knew existed, but we were losing because too many had stopped fighting. Then the voice, the same one from before, spoke again. "You must tell them." My heart pounded. I wanted to ask how. How could I make them believe? Before I could speak, the world shifted again, and suddenly I was standing before something even greater, a place beyond time, a throne, a judgment. And what I saw next would change everything. I stood frozen before it, a throne so immense, so radiant, that the very fabric of existence seemed to tremble around it. It wasn't made of gold or stone. It wasn't something crafted by human hands. It was something else entirely, a force beyond time, beyond creation itself, a throne of truth, and seated upon it, a presence so vast, so overwhelming, that my soul felt as though it might shatter under the sheer weight of its gaze. I couldn't see his face, not because it was hidden, but because my human mind simply couldn't comprehend it. I wasn't afraid, in the way I had feared death. No, this was different. This was a fear woven with awe, with love, with an understanding so deep that it stripped away every illusion I had ever held about myself. I was exposed. There was no hiding, no pretending. Every moment of my life, every thought, every action, every failure, every act of kindness or selfishness was laid bare before him. And then it began. I didn't see my life play before me like a movie. I relived it. I felt the laughter of my childhood, the warmth of my mother's embrace, the nights spent in quiet prayer, the whispered hopes, the dreams I thought had been ignored. And then I felt my failures, the times I had turned away from someone in need, the careless words spoken in anger, the moments I had chosen comfort over courage, selfishness over love, and worse, I felt the impact of my choices, not just in my own life, but in the lives of those I had hurt. A careless insult that had lingered in someone's heart for years. A moment of indifference that had changed the course of someone else's day, perhaps even their life. I wanted to look away. I wanted to plead ignorance. But here there were no excuses. The presence before me wasn't condemning me. It was showing me. Not out of wrath, but out of love, because truth wasn't about punishment, it was about understanding. And as I stood in that place, I understood something that shook me to my core. Nothing we do, nothing is insignificant. Every action, every word, every thought matters. The ripples extend far beyond what we can see. And then the presence spoke, not with words, but with knowing. You were never unseen. Your prayers were never unheard. Your actions never went unnoticed. Tears streamed down my face because in that moment I realized how blind I had been. I had spent so much of my life thinking that faith was about following rules, about trying to be good enough for God. But it had never been about that. It had always been about relationship, about love. And then I saw what was coming. The throne faded, the presence remained, and before me the earth stretched once more. But this time something had changed. The world looked the same, but it wasn't. I saw people, entire nations being led astray, and at the center of it all, him, the man from before, the leader, the savior, the one the world adored. He had brought peace. He had ended wars. He had united humanity under one cause. But it was a lie. Beneath his words, beneath his promises, there was something else lurking, a force ancient and patient. It didn't need to force people into obedience. They chose it because they wanted to believe. I saw churches emptying, not through persecution, but through distraction. I saw faith being twisted, made into something convenient, something easy. And I saw the moment when the world made its choice. They embraced him, and in doing so they turned away from the truth. Then I saw the ones who resisted, They weren't the powerful. They weren't the influential. They were the ones who still prayed. And as they prayed, I saw light surge from the earth like streams of fire. It empowered the warriors standing against the darkness. But for every warrior who stood, there were 1,000 shadows rising to consume them, because the enemy was fighting harder than ever. Because it knew its time was almost up, and then I saw the sky split open. A force unlike anything I had ever witnessed descended, light so brilliant it made the stars seem dim, a presence so vast that the very fabric of reality trembled beneath it. And the war erupted. It wasn't just angels and demons. Humans, redeemed souls, fought alongside the light. I saw people I had known in life, people who had endured, who had remained faithful when the world mocked them. They wielded weapons not made of steel, but of faith. And with each strike the darkness recoiled. But even then I knew the final choice had not yet been made. Then the presence turned to me again. You must go back. I didn't want to. After everything I had seen, after feeling the overwhelming love and truth that filled this place, how could I return to a world so blind? But the voice was gentle. They must be warned. Time is shorter than they think. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. They won't believe me. And then, silence, not the absence of sound, the kind of silence that waits. And I knew. It didn't matter if they believed me. My task wasn't to convince. It was to speak, to tell them, to sound the alarm. And before I could argue further, the world rushed toward me, everything blurred. The light faded. The weight of my physical body crashed over me like a tidal wave. And suddenly, I woke up. The moment I re-entered my body, it was like being plunged into freezing water. A violent gasp tore through my lungs as if I had been drowning. Pain surged through every inch of me, sharp, unbearable. Machines beeped wildly. Voices shouted I was back. I blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room, my mind still trapped between two realities. Nurses rushed around me, and I could hear the muffled voice of a doctor saying, "He's stabilized. I don't know how, but he's back." But none of it mattered, because I knew the truth now, and the truth was terrifying. Days passed, my body healed, but my soul felt like it was still suspended between two worlds. I tried to return to normal life, to answer messages, to watch the news, to have casual conversations, but nothing was the same because I could see it now. The world was already changing. The deception was already taking root. People were being led away from truth, not through force, but through distraction. Just like in my vision, just like he had shown me, I wanted to forget. I wanted to push it aside and tell myself it was just a hallucination, a near-death illusion created by my brain. But I couldn't, because deep down, I knew. I hadn't just been shown the future. I had been given a warning, and now I'm giving it to you. You might think this is just a story. You might dismiss it as imagination, as a desperate mind searching for meaning in a near-death experience. But I ask you this, why do you think you're hearing this now? Nothing is by accident. You were meant to hear this, just as I was meant to come back and tell it, because soon the world will have to make a choice. And when that moment comes, will you be ready? Will you recognize the deception? Will you stand for truth when the world calls it a lie, or will you follow the crowd, believing in the peace that isn't real? The time is shorter than you think. Wake up.